And definitely do not be afraid to fail. You might think that the world is ending, but it's really not. It's just a different opportunity opening up for you.
Hello everyone. So here we are at Super Lawyer YouTube channel. Today our guest is Susan Walsh, who is known worldwide as the classification guru, who is the fixer of data. She spends all her time making sure that we have clean and clear data for usage. She is a TEDx talker, she's a speaker, she has been an author of the book Spin the Spreadsheets. I went through it and I realized, okay, what she's talking about does make sense. And when we are talking about data, first name that comes to my mind is Susan. Today, I welcome you, Susan, and thank you for accepting my invitation to be a speaker.
No, thank you so much.
I would love to start our session by asking, obviously, the obvious question about your background and what actually inspired you to focus on data classification. And what were the challenges that you observed when you entered this field and you have been working on this for years?
Well, let me tell you, there was a lot. Now, you'll have to excuse me, I have a little bit of a croaky voice because I've been screaming in frustration at all the dirty data out there. Just kidding. I was having a good time last night. I didn't come from a data background. I came from sales, marketing, retail, and then I decided to open a women's clothes shop here in Guildford in the UK where I live. That was my first business. That didn't even last 1 year. It cost a lot of money and didn't sell very many items of clothing. So I needed a job quickly, and I needed any kind of job just to be able to pay my bills. And I found an ad online for a spend analytics company to classify procurement spend data. So that's really where it started. I had never done it before in my life. But once I started, I found it really enjoyable. There was something really satisfying about making something messy and disorganized really tidy in a spreadsheet. I'm not so great in the real world, but in a spreadsheet, it was really satisfying. And I was good at it and I was quick. And so I kind of ended up getting more work through this company and ended up managing a team of 14 people, and I had to train all of them and make sure we were all working consistently to the same standards. And after about 5 years, it was time for me to move on. But I didn't come from a procurement background and I didn't come from a data background. So I didn't know where I could get a job doing the same thing because I'm not a data analyst, although I can do some visual coding. I don't code. I don't have all the experience that a data analyst would need. And so really the only option for me was to set up the classification guru. And the reason that I chose the name was because we spend a lot of time on company websites trying to find out what they do so that we can classify their product or service. And you would not believe the number of companies who don't tell you what they do on their website. It's really unclear. You have to do a lot of digging. And it can take like 5 minutes on a website before you find out what they've done. So I wanted to have a business name that was really clear from the start what we did. But one of the biggest challenges for that was the fact that I had no connections in the industry at all. I had to build up a network from nothing. And I went to some procurement events and I spoke to lots of procurement people. And I really got the feedback that the service I was offering was a really good service and they were really interested. But I also realized that nobody knew I existed. And so nobody was looking for me because there were no other companies out there offering this as a standalone service. And even to this day, I think we're the only ones that do it as a specific service. And also we use people as well. Not much automation, definitely no AI. We use real people. And that's a difference as well. So it was a huge challenge, and we're coming up for 7 years in business now, which I cannot believe. And it's only really been the last 3 years, I would say, that things have really started to grow and people know who we are now, who I am now, what we do. And so they'll come to us when they have a data problem, or they just want to bounce an idea off of me. You know, what do you think about this? How can we do that? So yeah, it's been a wild and bumpy ride, but I've loved it.
It seems as if every company, even before launching their website, they're supposed to know what they are selling or what they are offering, because that's where the data gets, I would say, polluted the way you are talking about it.
They assume that when they read it, they understand it because they know what the business does. The best thing you can do is do a friends and family test. People who don't know anything about what you do, get them to read your website. And if they can't tell you what's on it, then you know you've got a problem.
Such simple explanation. If family can explain to you what your website does, then you are good to go. So,
Yeah.
in your experience, what kind of challenges does these organizations face when it comes to managing or classifying their data effectively? As you just suggested, that if your family and friends can explain to you what you are doing, then you are good to go. And how can an individual, let's say me or anyone else, equip themselves to become such kind of data compliance officer, I would say, or data compliance actor?
Yeah, so one thing I say is data is everybody's responsibility. We are not all data professionals, but we all work with data. So it's everybody's responsibility, whether you're a receptionist or the CEO. If you're inputting data, it has to be correct. If you are typing legal contracts for someone, the data, the information has to be correct. But more often than not, data problems are people problems. And what I find is that for people who are not data professionals, data and data quality and data governance can be very intimidating and scary. They don't really understand it. They don't understand why they have to keep data clean or what they have to do. And I think the biggest downfall is communication. I think that every single organization has some dirty data or data quality problems to an extent, some way better than others, but every organization will have data quality challenges. And quite often it's hard to get support from the business to pay to fix or clean your data or maintain it or get a new system in. And that's a real challenge. In terms of being like a data champion for the organization, I think you have to find somebody who is passionate about keeping the data clean for a start. So someone like me, but also someone who can communicate with the business, because there are a lot of amazing data professionals out there, but they are not all great communicators or networkers or great at speaking within the business. So you need someone who can communicate that as well as actually understand it. So that would be my advice. You will have someone. They'll be there hiding.
We need to have someone. So,
Yeah.
can you share some specific examples, as in how proper data classification can be done? And what kind of significant difference is there in case you are looking at a simple business or in a procurement business or procurement process? If you see, like, you are bringing in something, I would like to understand what an individual as a professional should be learning at this stage in order to make sure that what they are classifying is proper data or clean data.
So the first thing I would say is make sure your data has its coat on. Quite often, more often than not, multiple people will be working on the same data set. So like I was saying before, when I had a team of 14 people, getting everybody to work the same way is really important. So if you have your data coat on, make sure first of all that it's consistent. So everybody's working in the same way, everyone's classifying, and this could be procurement data, this could be legal data, this could be file security, you know, folders and access to things. Just make sure everyone has the same list of what things should be, how you should do it, what the process is, and that will be a really great start. Then your data has to be organized. So categorize it in a way that it's easy to find. If you know your business needs certain information on a monthly basis, categorize your data so that it's easy to pull that information out. And then also it has to be accurate. So, but define what accurate is, because in finance, there's no tolerance for error with numbers financially because you have to report on them. But if you're in sales and marketing, maybe it's you're putting information into your database and you only need certain bits of data information for it to be correct. So define what that is. And then once you've got your consistent, your organized, your accurate data, it's trustworthy. And that's really important. I think sometimes you'll be looking at data that's completely new and has never been classified, and sometimes you'll be looking at data that is partially or fully classified but isn't right. In either circumstance, I would say start from scratch, start from the bottom again. And most people are working with lots of data nowadays. If you have lots of data, you could break that down into priorities. It could be your top 100 customers first, or your top 80% of sales, or your top 80% of spend, or manufacturing, you know, and then you can start to work on that data. Context is so important when you're classifying data. I think that's the biggest area where people go wrong. So when I'm doing talks, something that I always show is it's a line of data, the supplier name is LinkedIn, the description says restaurant, and then somebody that was working for me classified it as restaurant because they looked at the description without the name. And, you know, if they'd looked at the name first, they would have known that it's not a restaurant, it's a networking platform, it's recruitment, it's training, it's something like that. So it's really important not to just look at that one row, that one cell, that one column, but look at the data as a whole. And then if you're using a taxonomy to classify, like a list of things to classify, make sure that list is easy to understand. So a bit like the website where I said, you know, your friends and family can understand it. If you've got a taxonomy and it's full of acronyms and maybe company-specific terminology, if people come in who are new, they might not understand it and might get it wrong, and you might end up with misclassification. So always have really clear classification options for your data to make sure that it's going to work properly and it's going to avoid as much miscommunication or misinterpretation as possible.
What are the potential consequences of having redundant or inaccurate data, areas which you are referring to, and how can they mitigate this particular problem? Why I'm asking is because many of our learners need to understand how they can get into this kind of area of practice and do good for data.
So first of all, in terms of mitigation, the most simple thing you can do is maintain your data on a regular basis. Look at it monthly or weekly or quarterly, depending on what the business needs, but look at it regularly and often. And the reason that that's really important is the more you look at your own data, the more obvious it is when something isn't right, and then it's easier to spot. So there are so many consequences to dirty data, inaccurate data, missing, incomplete data. First of all, it could be something as simple as if you're in supply chain, you might order too many parts, you might make too many parts, you might not have enough storage space for the parts you've made. It could be that you may have bought things in at a higher price because you didn't know the best price to negotiate at if you're in procurement. It could be fraud. So if you're in finance, you could have accounts set up in your system that are being paid that are not real accounts, or somebody is siphoning money. It could be that invoices are being paid twice because they're assigned to different accounts that are similar but not quite the same. There are so many things, and data privacy as well. Like there's a lot of global privacy laws or regional that, you know, everybody's having to protect data and keep it safe and secure. But particularly with GDPR, which is in Europe, one of the aspects of that data privacy is actually having accurate data too. So if someone holds information on me, but they have the wrong date of birth, the wrong address, the wrong phone number or email address, that's not only dirty data, you're technically in breach of the law. So that, and something that can happen, and we've seen this with some large companies, is they get huge fines and then they're all over the news, and that's really bad press and impacts the company reputation. So there are so many different ways. It can even impact as far as the headcount in departments or your bonus for the year. You know, if the numbers aren't right, then you're not going to get the right amount of money. So there are just so many different areas in which having unclean data is a real problem.
It seems as if we have to focus in understanding first for what purpose we are collecting that data, because there is where it starts with the collection, and the cleanliness starts from there itself. While you are this data expert, you do classification techniques as well. What were the key benefits that you see as an expert individual in the field? And I would love to hear some story where this expertise actually helped a client see the improvement in the real world, how it impacted their business, what kind of benefits they got.
Yeah, so back to classification again in a procurement sense. We classified data for a client. They already had classified data and they thought, yeah, we spend X amount on legal services. So we went through their whole data set and reclassified everything. Their spend was 40% higher. So their spend was almost double on legal services what they thought it was. So that means they've got a lot more suppliers in their category that they probably didn't need. They probably don't need 100 lawyers on your supplier database. You probably only need maybe 20 for specialisms and things. That has an impact on how much you're paying. Like if you could consolidate some of that down to just a couple of lawyers, solicitors, whatever, you probably get a better hourly rate from that organization if you're going to spend more money with them. So, you know, there's cost implications there. And just, yeah, again, if you don't even know that that spend is there, how can you manage and measure it? How do you know it's even real spend? How do you know that's not like a fake company? Because some of that legal services spend was classified as construction, marketing, HR. Like it was completely wrong. So, you know, the client can then go and completely revise and review everything they've got to make a better decision. And again, you know, there are the other clients where we've helped classify their data, give them visibility on what's going on. You know, I'm not saying that we did all this, but we certainly contributed to them making tens of millions of dollars of savings because they had the data to be able to make those decisions and make those negotiations, etc. Or it could be something as simple as we did a CRM database clean, and there, you know, a company was paying for like 30,000 contacts, and actually when we cleaned them up, there was only like 17,000. So they were paying money for redundant duplicate data. You know, it doesn't make any sense. So yeah, there's lots of examples, and time as well. Like if they try and do this themselves, in some cases it can be days or weeks. In some cases it could be up to a year that it's taking people to do it themselves, and we can do it in weeks or months.
Wow, your expertise is beyond my comprehension right now, because something that you are saying makes so much sense. Keeping that in mind, if a learner at our institution, as I told you, LawSikho or Skill Arbitrage, if they want to become such kind of data cleanliness officer, or data privacy officer, because people are now acquiring a lot of certifications. Then there are other privacy professionals who are there. So what kind of suggestions do you give them, or what kind of recommendations do you make, other than only having those certifications? What should be their focus area of understanding, and where should they focus while they are judging a company or working on a company? Like you said, the data was so much that it reduced from 30,000 to 17,000. It's almost half of what they were paying for. So how can a person make themselves equipped like you have made yourself? What suggestions do you have for those fellows?
So this has been years of experience now, but I didn't start out knowing all this. And the way that I learned a lot of what I know now is through taking on jobs on freelancer websites that paid virtually nothing. I made no money, but I learned an awful lot. So that's fine if you're a freelancer. If you're working in an organization, the best thing you can do is network. Network with other people, other departments. Try and get involved in helping out with other projects. When I did work in the corporate world, I was pretty good at like organizing and increasing sales and things. And then I ended up on a cross-functional project team, and kind of was managing it. And that was just because I made myself visible, but actually not just through me as a person, through my work. Like I was managing the wholesalers, and my sales were increasing 200% a year because I was good at what I did. And so people took notice of that. So just get to know people, ask them if they need help with something. Don't always kind of expect to get paid or credit for it in the beginning, but pick up the experience, because then you can start talking about it. And then people will think, oh, okay, this person knows something. Let's ask them or get them involved. But for them to know about you, you have to be known. So you have to network and within the company, talk to people at the coffee machine, walk around desks. Just, yeah. I mean, I was very good at doing that. As you can tell, I like to chat, so I was very good at that. And I get that that isn't everybody, and different cultures, different parts of the world. I'm sure there's different protocols within offices. So work that however you can within the environment you're in. I had to do it with this business too. I didn't know anyone. So I went to networking events. I went to meetings where I didn't know anybody in the room and said hello and did it that way. So find a way that works for you.
Thank you for pointing these things out, because it's absolutely necessary to network. And when you are freelancing, then also you have to understand that you should be able to do it for free in the very start, because it's not necessary that from day one you'll start getting paid. There are many times when I've heard people saying that data classification is absolutely challenging. In this challenging world, what fuels your passion for this work? And why do you enjoy it? What is that inner calling? And it would be really beneficial for our learners to understand how much do they need to know about this field even before they start networking, or let's say freelancing.
I think just knowing the importance of clean data, how much time that can save, how many potential disasters you could prevent by having clean data. I think definitely part of it is just something you either have it or you don't. It's like artists, you can either draw or you can't. I really do think there's a certain mindset when it comes to cleaning that. You have to love it or you couldn't do it. It would drive you nuts. People who don't love it don't last long. Find out what you enjoy and focus on that. That's certainly what I've done, and that's paid off. But also, there are so many different aspects to data. So you might not enjoy cleaning spreadsheets, but I know people who would happily sit for hours and read legal contracts and find all the information and correct it. So there are so many different types of cleaning data. Try out different things and see what you like. Do you like reading and correcting, or do you like spreadsheets and correcting? Do you like something else? See what works for you. Just because you tried one way, don't give up. There might be a different way for you.
Absolutely. That's such a great advice that keep on trying unless you find your calling will be the best thing to do.
Yeah.
So, how do you actually ensure a balance between the kind of speed and accuracy, the way you do the work, while dealing with these kind of large volumes of data?
That is such a good question. I'm a perfectionist, so in the early days, it was really difficult and I really struggled with it because it had to be perfect for me. Now, this will absolutely depend on, again, the type of data that you're working with. But for me, it's lots of rows of spreadsheets, it's lots of suppliers. The way that we can target down and focus and prioritize is things like the top 95% of supplier spend. Now, out of 1,000 suppliers, that might only be 100, that 90%. So start with that and focus on that. Contracts, I bet there are sections that are more legally kind of dangerous than other sections. So, maybe a notice period section isn't as important as the name of the client, getting that right. So prioritize what should be checked. Rather than going through the whole thing step by step, maybe there's a better way. Maybe it's check the priority ones first, then check the next ones. So whatever it is, find that for your data. And you have to accept that it will never be perfect. You will never get it all right. Things will be missed. Just try and do what you can to minimize the number of errors that you've got.
You said you are a perfectionist. How did you give up that perfectionism and move to, okay, everything can't be perfect? I would love to hear some example or some story where this perfection helped avert some potential disaster for a company or an agency.
So the reason that I became less of a perfectionist was because as a business, you charge X amount for a project and you think it's going to take X amount of time. And then once you've hit that time, you start to lose money. So then that's when you start to prioritize what you need to finish first. So, if I get a line wrong that's misclassified and the value is 10 cents, nobody's going to have a hissy fit or, the world's not going to end because of that. If I get a row wrong that's $1 million, that's a problem. So I kind of learned that, the 10 cents, the $1, the $5 values, it's not the end of the world if it's not quite right. But getting it right is helpful for the clients because there's something called tail spend in procurement. So it's like the 80-20 rule. The top 80% of your spend is the top 20% of your suppliers. So you might have, like I was saying, 100 suppliers out of 1,000, and that's the majority of the spend. Or 200 of the 1,000, that's your 80. So how it benefits the client is most of the time, a lot of companies will leave that 20% at the bottom and not classify it. But that 20% could be like 800 rows of data. And hidden in that 800 rows of data could be fraud, could be company misspending, could be invoice errors. And so we classify all the data. We don't miss any of it. We classify all the data. And then how that helps clients is they actually get a better picture of what's going on in their organization, what they're spending their money on, is there any fraud going on? I don't have specific examples of where it stopped something happening, but it certainly highlights actually that you might have more suppliers in a category than you think. So another project we did for a client was we got 4,000 suppliers in kind of like Chinese, Japanese, Korean. All we had was the supplier name and the country that they came from. That was the only information we had. So we went and Googled everything. And when we did all that and went back to the client, they said, we have 1,000 consultants on our supplier list. This is ridiculous. We now need to do a project to get rid of most of those consultants from our supplier list. So that's a really good example of where, us doing that level of detail helped them see something that they didn't even know existed. They didn't even know it was a problem.
So you practically let people know when they don't even know if that problem exists. And that's how you help businesses grow.
Yeah.
That's something you have been doing, and that's what I have been following for so long. What kind of advice will you give to individuals, the learners who are looking forward to either become data practitioners, data classification officers, or data privacy officers? Because it is absolutely new. Even if GDPR is too old, still it is new for people who are entering data privacy world. What kind of advice would you have for those new entrants?
Get as much experience as you can. Do it for free if you have to, work extra. It will pay forwards when you kind of have all that experience to hand that people are looking for. Look for areas where there is less skills in specific areas of data privacy, specialize in that area, and then you've got more chance of getting a job in that area. And definitely do not be afraid to fail, because I think a lot of people are worried about getting things wrong. But actually, that's how we learn. That's how we get better. Oh, I've messed up so many things, but even my first business, I messed up. But I learned so much from that. And I literally would not be sitting here today talking to you if my first business hadn't failed. I would never have fallen into the data world. So, you might think that the world is ending, but it's really not. It's just a different opportunity opening up for you.
That's such amazing advice and suggestion. How did you build your, I would say, empire being a freelancer? Because many a times people have this query, usually the learners, because here we guide them through becoming independent and becoming freelancers as well. What would be your suggestion, as in how patient they should be? Because usually people start losing their patience, the new entrants mostly.
Yeah, so I didn't get my first client in this business for 10 months. I had nothing for 10 months. So my first advice would be save up about 6 months worth of salary and bills, etc. I would say that just get so much experience, and will be frustrating because some of it will be free or cheap. People will take advantage of you, but just make sure you get something out of it, whether it's a learning experience. If you have a good network, then you are more likely to do well. Just about every other business I know was built off the back of a network. And so they had people referring them from their friends. I didn't have that. I did this the really hard way. And it's a miracle I'm still here nearly 7 years later, because it's a really tough, long road. I'm only starting now after 7 years to really have people come to us and say, can you help? Rather than trying to be out there and getting lots of attention. And now we're starting to get people will change jobs and they'll take us to their new company, or they'll refer us to people they know. And so you have to be patient. For the first 2 years of this business, I took on part-time work, temporary work. I think in the beginning it was needed just to pay my bills, but it did overtake, and the business was sacrificed at times because I had to work rather than focus on the business. But you have to do what you have to do. Start as a side hustle if you need to, work evenings and weekends and see how it goes. Ask people if there's a need for the service you're providing. You might think there is, but you might start speaking to people and you might find that actually it's something completely different they want. And be open to being flexible and change as well. Don't have a set kind of, I do this and this is the only thing I do. Be open to trying new things. Quite often we'll be asked, can you help us with this? And we'll be honest and say, well, we've never done it before, but we know how we could do it and we can try for you. And more often than not, that works out because we're honest. We don't say, yeah, we can do that, and then we have no idea how to do it and the project fails. If you're open from the start about what you are capable of, that opens doors too. And once you start building relationships with those suppliers and those companies, they start to trust you. And so they start to say, well, actually, could you help us with this? And could you help us with that? But it is the long game, and this isn't for everybody. There's a lot of unpredictability. Even last year, We can go months without new projects coming in sometimes. We're project based, so we could be full on for 3-4 months, and then there might be nothing for a month or two. So you have to be able to be okay with that level of uncertainty.
It definitely makes sense that you have to have patience and you have to keep trying. Obviously, if you would have succeeded in your first business, we would not be sitting here and hearing from you about data classification
Yeah,
and
and yeah, who knows? Like, if I did still have the shop, it probably would have been completely demolished during COVID because everything shut. So, everything works out in mysterious ways. You just have to trust the process.
Wow, that's amazing advice. Thank you so
Lovely.
much.
One
Thank you
day.
so much once again for being here.
Thank you.